In the previous video, we saw how to install tools and set up environments. In this video, we are going to build a real-world IAM setup using AWS CDK. We will create two S3 buckets, define IAM groups with different permission levels, create managed policies, attach them to those groups, and then assign IAM users to them. This architecture diagram represents what we are going to achieve today. For learning purpose, we are creating a scenario here that a visitor user can see all the buckets and their names, which means list all the buckets. So the visitor can list all the buckets available in that AWS account. But they can only list the buckets, remember. They cannot explore items or objects inside them. While the developer user can fully work but with just two buckets, this read-only bucket and full access bucket. So this is because we will create a managed policy and explicitly mention these two buckets in the resources and actions to perform. We will also be using CloudFormation output to output these users' access key ID and secret access key. This can be required if we want to access the resources from command line tools. But now let's jump into the VS Code. So in the leaf folder, let's create a file and let's give it a name like so. So this name can be anything, but I gave this name just to make it easy to remember what is stack it belongs to. So this stack will hold everything related to IAM users, groups, policies, and S3 access. So let's start by importing the core CDK libraries along with IAM and S3 constructs. Import everything as CDK from leaf, and let's import construct from the constructs. Import everything, and finally import S3 like so. Then let's define a CDK class itself. So let's give the same name as the file name. IAM S3 it is a class. Then let's define a construct and provide scope, ID, and props, just the same way as we did earlier. Constructor, construct, any string, CDK stack props like so. Okay. And now let's create an instance of two S3 buckets as mentioned in the diagram. So we will be creating two S3 buckets. So read-only bucket, it can be anything, any name, and it needs this, any ID name, then provide the construct object. So here this is the current CDK stack instance. Example, create S3 bucket inside this stack. So this refers to the scope mentioned in the construct above, and they need this, which is the scope of this class, and any ID, which can be any string. So I just gave this identical name to this variable, and then the remaining props is the construct. Okay, then provide bucket name. It should be very unique. Yeah, so we can actually give any name, but it should be very unique. It should be like universally unique. Nobody should be using the same name. If somebody has already used this name before, then we will not be able to create it. And let's put the removable policy to destroy. Like so. Auto delete objects also true. For demo purpose, we are using this removable policy destroy and auto delete object true. So the stacks can be cleared off. I mean, we can delete it easily when we use this command CDK destroy later. But this is something you should only do in development or demo environment. So similarly, let's instantiate another bucket. I can copy this, give a different name, and bucket name should be different. Yeah, and removable policy destroy and auto delete object also true. Now let's instantiate two IAM groups. The idea here is that we never attach permissions directly to users. Instead, we attach permissions to groups and then assign users to those groups, which is the best practice in AWS. Let's instantiate developer group. So the scope is this, the scope of this class, and ID is, so it can be any string. Let's provide a group name, developer group, as we saw in the diagram. And let's instantiate also the visitor group. I'll copy this. Yeah, so what we did so far, we created two buckets, so read-only bucket and full access bucket. They are simply buckets, nothing fancy. Just the names a little different, but just by these names, these buckets are not doing anything. There you can take them as simply plain buckets, which can be removed when we do CDK destroy. And we also created two groups, developer group and visitor group. So they are also simply groups with different group names. Okay, then let's create a managed policy that allows full access to both buckets. So the idea is that the developer will have full access to these buckets. Managed policy, and the scope is this, and provide any ID. Yeah, the same name, just for consistency. And provide a name, managed policy name, can be anything, again for consistency. Provide the same name. And here is the main thing. So we'll create a statement here. and the statement will hold the policy statement and different accents on different resources. So we create it this way: statements. It takes an array, and now let's create a separate policy statement for separate purpose. For example, we want to give the list bucket permission, so so that the developer user will be able to list the buckets. Let's create the policy statement itself first, like so, and then it takes action. Yes, action is an array, so s3, and what we want to do for the s3, list bucket. So this is object level permission. This is different from list all my buckets. We'll be seeing that list all my buckets later. So list all my buckets will be giving permission to list all the buckets in the AWS account. But here the list bucket means this is just like listing the object level buckets in the object level. So this is object level permission. So now so which buckets to list, we will be mentioning this in the resources. So resources is also an array, and which bucket we want for this user is read-only bucket. Yeah, read-only bucket, and provide its ARN. Yes, like so. And we also have another bucket, full access bucket, and ARN. So it means list these two buckets. Okay, a read-only bucket and full access bucket. So these two buckets, this the developer user or any user where we will be giving this permission, this policy. So wherever we attach this policy, that group and that group's user will be able to list the buckets which are mentioned in these resources. So it means these two buckets the user can list. So let's then grant full object level permission like get, put, delete object in the action array. So let's create statement, and in the actions we provide pretty much all the get, put, and delete actions. Get object, and now so which resources the user is able to get, put, and delete objects. So let's provide the resources. Read only bucket dot bucket ARN, and then so which means anything which is inside this bucket. And likewise instead of read only, this time full access bucket and bucket ARN. Yeah, so notice how object permissions always use bucket ARN /star. This is a very common IAM pattern. So which means so anything that comes after this ARN. Okay, and finally let's also allow developers to list all buckets in the account. This is optional, but it is very useful in many real world scenario. If developer needs to see which other buckets are there available in the account. which is not important, but we can just provide we can also use this policy statement. And this is a little bit different, which is S3 and list all my buckets. This is account level permission, so which means list all my buckets which are available in that account. So this is called account level permission. While list bucket, so this is only object level permission. So this is particularly to these two buckets only, not to the entire buckets available in that account. So this is different from this. And in the resources, it is important to provide all the resources, because if we are listing all the buckets in that account, then we should explicitly say that okay, it applies to all the buckets in that account. So we created this developer full access policy. Now we can similarly we can create a managed policy for visitor user also. So managed policy name will be, can be anything. For simplicity, we provide the same name and we'll create a statement. It's an array. Statement. Okay, list all my buckets as mentioned earlier. So this is account level permission. So the visitor or user will get this managed policy attached to his group. So the visitor user will be able to list all the buckets in that account. But remember, the user will not be able to do any get, put, or delete, or any kind of actions on those buckets. Only list or only see those bucket names. Yeah. And for this kind of action, we have the resources we have to mention is all the resources as mentioned earlier. So you have to give all the resources, which means a star. And then now we created two policies. So next, what we can do next is we can attach those policies to groups, like so. Visitor group add managed policy, and here provide the bucket policy. So this is visitor group of is attached to this visitor bucket policy, which means now any user which is inside visitor group will be able to list all the buckets from that AWS account. So likewise, developer group dot yes. So any user which is inside this developer group will get this developer full access policy, which is the user is able to list the buckets, these two buckets, and the user is also able to perform these actions, get object, put object, and delete object. There could be many other, but for this tutorial purpose, for simplicity, we are just doing this get, put, and delete. Okay, and the resources are the same two buckets. Finally, let's create the users, IAM users themselves. We haven't created any users yet. We have only created groups and policies, and we have attached those policies to the groups. Now we'll create groups, and then we will assign the IAM users inside those groups. Developer user, and ID anything, object. We can provide username, so it can be, let's put it to developer user. Okay, and let's provide a password also, because we need them to log in later for testing. Secret value, provide any password, but should be strong. Okay, let's put it to, and also let CDK know that we do not require to reset the password. This is because we don't want to go to that part right now about resetting the password. We just want to check by logging in and without changing the resetting the password. Okay, so this way we don't have to reset the password. So this is developer user, and next up let's create a visitor user. Actually this is developer user. Let's create a visitor user, and I'll copy this visitor user, okay. So now we created the IAM user also. So next step, we will assign those users to the respective groups. Developer user dot add to group, and the group is developer group. Likewise, visitor user add to group, and visitor group. Now this is where the magic happens. So these users automatically get permissions through group membership. That is why we attached policies to groups instead of individual users. Just imagine if there are hundreds of users who are created for the same purpose, and if, for example, we have to give each individual users the same permission set by attaching the same policy document. So this is not productive. So what we need to do instead is we need to create separate purposeful groups and assign users to those groups and attach policies to those group level. So this is kind of industry level practice. So once we attach those policies to the groups, any user who belongs to those groups will also get those permission set. So finally, we can create access key for both users and output them using CloudFormation output. Developer access key CloudFormation access key and scope. Name can be anything. I will give the same name, and the object it takes is username. Developer user and username. So likewise, we can do the same for visitor user. Let me copy this. So this allows to configure AWS CLI profiles and test access from the terminal. Yeah, I think we'll also see this part later. So when we are on the testing, once we create these resources, and when we are testing in the AWS console, we'll also test it from terminal, and that's why we need these access keys. So let's now output those CloudFormation outputs for secret access key and access key ID. So when we do CDK deploy, then these outputs will be visible in the terminal here, and we can use them from the terminal to access those buckets. And this is a way of testing. Again, this is also not a recommended approach, but only for testing we can do it. CloudFormation output scope developer access key ID, any name, and then what value we want to output. Access key and its reference. So this time for visitor access key and dot reference. And next we also need to output the secret access key. Well, let's put this together here. CF and output developer secret access key, and the value will be access key dot secret access key. So we can do the same for the visitor. Value will be visitor access key dot attribute secret access key. Yeah, so we have got the secret access key, and also we got the access key ID for both. These are the required ones to test the bucket access from terminal. Okay, so if everything goes well, then we should be able to deploy this stack. In order for that, we need to import this stack here. S3 import like so. CDK synth for this stack. This will give tell us if there is any issue in the code. We'll immediately see this in the synth. Okay, so it looks there is no issue, so it's going to create resources like this. Okay, let's deploy the same stack. Okay, go ahead, let's check the cloud formation. CDK IAM group policy access, so this is happening. Now let's check IAM users. There should be 2 new users. They are not yet created. They are the previous ones. CDK demo user and demo user, they are previous ones. If everything goes well, there should be 2 users, 2 S3 buckets, 2 groups. Yeah, S3 bucket is created. This is my full access bucket example came, my read-only bucket example. So both buckets are ready. Soon we should be seeing 2 more. Yeah, there are new users added, visitor user, and we still have developer user. Yeah, this is visitor user and this is developer user. Let me make it a little bit small. We have visitor user and we don't have developer user yet. There you go. So developer user and visitor user. Create is still on the progress. Let's check the policy. Yeah, developer full access policy is the policy which we created here. So developer full access policy, and yeah, and visitor should also have visitor bucket policy, bucket view policy. So stack is complete. Now we can check. Let's see if we can log in with the given credentials. Let's first log in with a developer user, and the developer user, the username is developer user, and password should be this one for the developer user. Let's log in from Cognito window. Developer user, password, login. Okay, yeah, there are a lot of restrictions yet. So what we can do is we can check the S3 bucket. if there is any error or not. So we don't have any error, so we can clearly check these buckets. We can list these buckets. So we logged in with developer user, and the developer user can easily list these buckets. So these actually, this one and this one, these two are the ones we just created, but this one is was already existing there, because the developer user has the ability to list all the buckets in this account. So uh, he can see all the buckets. However, the developer user uh, cannot list this bucket. I mean, cannot see anything inside this bucket, which is the default one. So which means this bucket is so we have not given any permission regarding this bucket. So we have only given attached policies to regarding these two buckets. So the developer user should be able to list this bucket easily, and also should be able to upload or delete or anything. So for instance, let's add a file. Okay, test.txt. I have one file already there. Let's upload, and without any problem he's able to upload the object inside the bucket. So once again, because this bucket, this one is a default bucket which is already existing here, and we have not given any resource permission to this bucket. We only have given permission to these two buckets, this one and this one, for the developer user. That's why the developer user is able to go inside and even upload file like this. For example, can go inside here without any errors. You don't see any errors here. But if the developer user tries to list any object which is inside this bucket where he doesn't have permission, then there will be error. You can see insufficient permission to list the bucket object, to list objects. Okay, there is one more thing we need to check. We just uploaded one file, test.txt, and the user is still not able to will not be able to view this content here. This is why, because this is a browser, and this browser doesn't know which if this is the developer user, or if this user is the user with all the permissions. That's why we cannot able to see any content here, and the access is denied. But there is a workaround to see the contents also. We'll check this in a while. But before that, let's log out from the developer user and log in with the visitor user, just for testing what are the things the visitor user is able to see. Okay, the visitor user is, the password is so there is a lot of restriction for this user. However, the visitor user should also be able to list all these three buckets, this one, and this one. These two are again the one which we created just now, but this one was already existing. But in any case, he's just a visitor, so he's not allowed to go inside and check anything. So there is lack of permission. Likewise, if likewise we have already uploaded one test.txt file, but this user is not able to list even that test.txt file. Why? Because he doesn't have permission. He only has permission to list the buckets, which means he only has permission to check the bucket names, read the bucket names. So the main idea is the visitor is able to list all the buckets, can see all the buckets, but cannot go inside the buckets, while the developer is able to list all the buckets, and the developer is still able to access only those two buckets which we have explicitly given permission, even though there could be many other buckets, already existing buckets, but the developer is also not allowed to, for example, enter into this bucket, so which we already saw. And this is visitor, and the visitor is not even able to see what developer has uploaded in this bucket, because he doesn't have permission. So that was all we wanted to. So however, let's log in with the developer once again. Okay, and let's try to go inside the bucket where he has uploaded test.txt. And here's the thing, if you go inside here and if you hit this URL, yeah, as we did earlier, so this user is not able to see any contents. Why? Because as mentioned, this is the browser which does not identify if this user is authenticated or if this user has permission or not. So what we can do instead, we can check a few things. We can configure the profile for, let's see, this developer user at least. And in order to configure the profile, we have generated the secret access key and access key ID. So we can check this secret access key and ID, they are here. So let's use these secrets and let's configure the profile for this developer user. Okay, so how we can do this is AWS configure profile developer user, just the same way as we did earlier in previous video. Looks like I have already configured it before. And then let's provide this access key ID which we have output there, and also secret access key which is like this, and for region we can use the default one. Now the developer user is configured. So what we can do next is we can copy the contents. Okay, this is we can go to the buckets actually, and let's copy this S3 URI, and then we'll try to copy now, because the user is configured, the developer user is configured, so we can easily copy this test.txt from there to our local computer. Let's do that. AWS S3 copy, so copy and then paste that URL, and then where do you want to output those contents? Test.txt. Let's create another file, test.txt, and let's generate it here in the same project. Okay, there it is. So test.txt. Now we can read content. So just testing content inside S3 bucket. Now we can view this S3 bucket contents. So we are able to view this S3 bucket contents only because this is a developer user. But for test user, even if we configure this test user like so, we will still be not be able to view the contents, because the test user does not have permission to go inside the bucket or list any objects inside the bucket. There is also another way. If you want to see the contents of the bucket in the URL here, like here, so there is also another way, but for that we have to pre-assign a kind of temporary URL for this. So let's maybe quickly do this one also. So we have to create a temporary URL which will be through which we can view the contents in the browser also. So let's do it. AWS S3, and then paste the same URL, and then so you have to give the expiration time. It expires in 300 seconds, which means 5 minutes. So let's hit enter, and it should generate this temporary URL. Yeah, this one. Let's copy this, and it will expire in 5 minutes. So let's paste this temporary URL, and there you go. We can view this in the browser also. This is just for testing purpose. All right, so let's quickly recap what we set out to build in this video, and what we actually achieved. So based on this diagram, so we created two S3 buckets using AWS CDK, and then we defined two IAM groups, one for developers and one for a visitor. The visitor group was initially given very limited permission. They can only see S3 bucket names, but they cannot list or access any bucket contents. The developer group, on the other hand, has full access to both bucket, including listing, uploading, downloading, or even deleting objects. We then created IAM users, assigned them to their respective groups, and generated access keys so we can test everything using the AWS CLI. So this perfectly demonstrates how IAM users, groups, and policies work together, and how we can enforce least privilege access, which means give only the least minimum access. Don't give the full access unless it is required. That is called the least privilege access. Now we have created the resources. It's time to destroy again. CDK destroy, because I don't want to pay any bills to the AWS, so I quickly destroy this. Yes, the delete is in progress. So yeah, just a quick reminder, hard coding password and outputting access key like this should only be done while you are learning or in your demo environments only. In real production systems, you would never do so. There can be some security breaches, and other people can use it, and yeah, there can be consequences. So the best way will be in the production. There will be identity IAM identity center, or you can also use secret manager in order to do this. Yeah, the destroy is also complete. Now that we understand how IAM permissions and S3 access control work, it is time to actually use S3 for something real. In the next episode, we are going to build and deploy a static website using AWS CDK and S3. We'll create an S3 bucket, configure for website hosting, making it publicly accessible in a controlled way, and then automatically deploy our website files directly into the bucket using AWS CDK. By the end of the next video, you will have a live static website hosted on AWS, so fully provisioned and deployed using infrastructure as code. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.